Welcome, friends, to Breakfast in the Ruins, a Michael Moorcock flavoured podcast. On this, the first show of 2025, Happy New Year, we're tying up some 2024 business. Miles is back, so we can conclude our reportage on Mike's entry into the canon of Doctor Who with the coming of the Terraphiles Part 3. So expect unfeasibly massive spaceships, time storms, more millinery, Captain Abley and the Bubbly Boys, and the intersection of the Who universe with the second ether. It's all going on as we hurtle towards a cosmic climax. And of course we talk about lots of other stuff too that was just floating around our peripheral vision from a Who perspective, like Stanley Baker's Comb Forward. And we dwell for a while on when Doctor Who gets nihilistic. And Miles gives us an update on the latest from the Casual Trek podcast, of course. So join us. We're back at Derry Tom's and Miles is back. Miles, barista extraordinaire, writer of Who stories and co-host of the Casual Trek podcast. Welcome back, Miles.
Always a pleasure to be back.
Well, always a pleasure to have you back. Now, it's funny we mentioned the Casual Trek podcast because you just mentioned this is your second podcast recording in a day, and it's only early where you are.
Yep. Normally we record on Mondays, but Charlie's out of town for the week, and so it was today or not, and I didn't want to, we've had, the Terraphiles have been coming for most of the year now.
Well,
I did not want to push us off into 2025.
Yeah, we did exchange messages a couple of days ago, didn't we, saying we never even got halfway through this bloody book. We just need to rattle on and get through it, otherwise there's going to be a part 4.
As that, because Charlie keeps ripping me about it, so telling him today, we're going to finish this book today to spite you.
Yes, absolutely. Take that, Charlie. So on the subject of Casual Trek, you've just recorded your Christmas episode. Any teasers? Any spoilers?
Oh, we are doing a DS9 episode which has a guest star from Space 1999.
Oh, Nick Tate. I remember that one. Yeah.
Lot of fun. Good old Miles O'Brien once more up, out of his depth. And then we watched an episode from this current last season of Strange New Worlds, which I hadn't had a chance to watch yet because, me and keeping up on regular TV, we don't see eye to eye. My executive dysfunction has executive dysfunction.
So when you say this last series of Strange New Worlds, that's season 2, season 3 is not out yet, is it?
No.
Right, okay. I don't keep massively on top of what's on Paramount when it comes to Star Trek, so I'm always several steps removed from what's going on in the world of Star Trek. Yeah, actually, just even before Paramount Plus, because frankly, I didn't really watch Voyager or Enterprise either. Anyway, well, I look forward to hearing that one.
Yep, Voyager and Enterprise is where I initially dropped off back when it was still on terrestrial telly.
Yeah, and well, I'm sure there's a whole episode there talking about the pros and cons of TOS, TNG, DS9. Does Voyager have a 3-letter acronym?
VOY. VOY. VOY.
VOY and ENT.
ENT.
All right. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's probably a whole podcast in that, and I will keep my powder dry talking about what I love, what I hate, and why I just couldn't be bothered with Voyager. But anyway, interestingly, over the last few days, because of course we've been building up to this for quite a while, we were going to record it probably, I don't know, maybe sometime in October, but October got completely away from me with Halloween episodes and other bits, November, whenever it was, with Halloween episodes. But a couple of days ago, weird connection, Phil and I watched an old 1970 mercenary film called The Last Grenade.
Okay.
Right? Now bear with me here. So this is a film I've been dimly aware of for probably 30 years, but it was always really hard or impossible to find. But these days, thanks to things like YouTube and other countries releasing things on Blu-ray that you can't find in the UK, it's suddenly available. So I got the French Blu-ray and I got really excited about it. And as is often the case with these things, it did not live up to expectations.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but Stanley Baker plays an aging mercenary with TB, right, who's determined to take a job that will allow him to exact some vengeance over a terrible betrayal by an American mercenary that led to the deaths of dozens of his comrades. right? This has nothing to do, so far, with Doctor Who or Michael Moorcock, right? But bear with me. So this villain, incidentally, was played by an actor called Alex Cord. Do you remember Airwolf?
I was too young for Airwolf.
Right. Well, in the series Airwolf, Jan Michael Vincent and Ernest Borgnine had this weird CIA boss stroke handler who was kind of a swish guy with a goatee beard who always wore a white suit, and I think he might have had an eye patch. That's the only place I ever know this guy Alex Cord from. But the rest of the cast is rounded out by Honor Blackman as the love interest, Richard Attenborough as the general in Hong Kong, who Stanley Baker has to kind of negotiate the political complexities around Richard Attenborough. And his small group of mercenaries include Andrew Keir, Quatermass from Quatermass
Yep.
and the Pit, a very young John Thor, who's probably in his 20s at this point, but still manages to look 45, of course. And this is where the Who connections start to come in. Well, actually, they came in a second ago, but we'll get to that. Scaroth of the Jaggeroth himself, Julian Glover, right? So, it was interesting, ultimately a bit crap, but it had 3 or 4 other very interesting things going for it. Now, Andrew Keir was, of course, also in Daleks Invasion Earth 2150,
Yep.
the second Peter Cushing Doctor Who film. And so was another actor in the film, a guy called Ray Brooks, who played David in the Daleks Invasion of Earth film. Now, David, of course, in the TV series taps off with Susan, but I think she's like 12 in the movie, so that story beat doesn't happen. And Stanley Baker, at one point, also says, when he's moaning about how old Broken Down he is, he says he's, drumroll, 42, which was upsetting. That was pretty upsetting. The second upsetting thing is, 20 minutes in, Phil said of Stanley Baker, he's just a poor man's Sean Connery.
Ouch.
Yeah, which almost started a fist fight in our living room. Although, to be fair to her, had this been made 7 or 8 years later, it probably would have been Sean Connery in this role. And Stanley Baker even has an outrageous comb forward that out Connery's late 70s Connery. But on top of all this, on top of all these Who connections, there are other character actors in it playing small roles, one of whom is the guy who played the Poacher in Spearhead from Space.
God.
He's in it as a sort of missionary in Hong Kong, working with poor Chinese people. The guy plays a man from the Ministry. He played Time Lord. I can't remember which one. I think it was in The Deadly Assassin. So there's all these Who connections. But what makes it even more directly connected to Who is it was the last film directed by Gordon Fleming, who directed
Doctor Who and the Daleks and Daleks Invasion of Earth.
That's right, he did. And I don't think in our first 2 episodes, when we were talking about all things Who, I don't think we've even mentioned Peter Cushing Doctor Who films. So I thought, well, if I need a tenuous avenue in to talking about the Peter Cushing Doctor Who films on the next time we talk about Coming of the Terraphiles, well, it just landed in my lap because I watched Gordon Fleming's last film. So, Peter Cushing Doctor Who films. How did you just come across them on telly like everybody else as a kid?
Yeah, I was of that age. I think one of my earliest memories of like Daleks is Daleks Invasion of Earth 2150, when the guy's trying to escape from the saucer and he's like running across like the tops of the buildings, and then the Daleks just kind of slowly fire extinguish him to death.
Yeah,
that's the thing I always remember is the Dalek death rays being fire extinguishers in these movies.
I saw that at Nana and Pop's house when I was a kid, and I remember being tremendously excited by that escape scene from the saucer. I thought it was wonderful. I thought the Robo-Men were the coolest thing in the world, even though now they look like some probably, I don't know, Top Shop, circa 1986, funky, all-in-one suit that a woman might have wore to be in the audience on Top of the Pops with a really nice crash helmet. But nevertheless, I still think they're quite swish, the Robo-Men, much better than the TV series.
I don't know, I just like the degraded human zombie look of the Robo-Men in the show.
Fair.
Like, it just shows us how little, like, the Daleks just care about the human slaves. Like, they don't give them, like, fancy gimp suits and nice crash hats. It's like, yep, we're going to give you a couple of milk cartons taped to your head and just the crappiest t-shirt we dug out of the ruins.
That is fair. It's a very different aesthetic, but I think it fits the aesthetic of the TV series.
Yeah.
because the TV serial is extraordinarily grim and dank and mucky. When I first saw that, I think it was on VHS. So my first experience of the Dalek invasion of Earth, my first exposure to it, I should say, as a kid was the movie, and I'd probably seen the movie 3 or 4 times before I finally got hold of the TV serial. And the TV serial is like a dark, gritty. You take the Daleks out of it, it could be Secret Army or something like that. It was incredibly grim, especially the old ladies who betray them. And the Black Marketeer in the TV series are really, really earthy and convincing.
I rewatched it last year on my very slow rewatch. Was it last year or this year? And it was interesting to watch Terry Nation when he's still kind of not, when he's actually kind of giving a crap and not phoning it in. Because like all the time, even like all the side characters, like the 2 old ladies, like the Black Marketeer, all feel three-dimensional in a way a lot of his later characters in, say, like, even Planet of the Daleks, my personal favorite Terry Nation story, don't. You can see all the DNA in Dortmund of what's going to become Rog Blake in about 15 years' time.
Yeah, I've not seen Planet of the Daleks probably since the early 90s. I probably saw that on VHS as well. Oh. And I can't remember a whole lot about it. I'm glad to rewatch that.
It was my first like full Doctor Who story that I watched because it was being repeated during the 30th anniversary, and like it looks glam and 70s, everything's like brightly colored, but for like a 10-year-old kid, this is like the high theater that makes Doctor Who so unbelievably camp and then just like thrilling escape. It's everything I love about Doctor Who in a tiny primordial ball, with John Pertwee just kind of swishing around in the most fantastic suit in a crappy set, and it's everything lovely.
I think that's also the serial where they actually used movie Daleks, didn't they?
Yeah,
they took a movie Dalek and snazzed it up to be the Supreme Dalek in the Dalek base.
It doesn't look as impressive as it hoped, and actually, it was that story that sparked me off my rewatch, because I was watching Star Wars Ahsoka, and I was just it just felt really bland, like really bored. I was like, sod it, I'm gonna put on Planet of the Daleks. It's not a well-written story, but it has more color and joy in it than this, and it just made me go, oh man, I love classic Who so much. Sometimes I have to remind myself just how much I love this series.
Yeah, and it's on iPlayer, isn't it? So
yep.
I've got no excuse really. I need to pull my finger out and go and watch it. I don't know why, but when I was buying a lot of the DVDs, I've never bought the Blu-rays, but when I was buying a lot of the DVDs, I had things like Day of the Daleks. I had loads and loads of the John Pertwee ones. I think I've got Frontier in Space on DVD. So actually, did that come in a box set with both stories? Oh God, I might even have it on DVD, but never have got around to watching it. I'm actually going to start hunting through the shelf.
Also, if you want for audiobooks, the Planet of the Daleks Target novelization is read by Mark Gatiss, and he's really good at doing like the Pertwee voice. And it's when Terrence Dicks passed a few years ago, that was the one I had to put on and go, okay, this is how I remember this guy who was just deeply influential on just my childhood, along with millions of others.
So what did you make of the Peter Cushing movies on a whole? I mean, obviously you've got the snazzy Daleks, you've got the fire extinguishers because they thought lasers would be too frightening for children. I think originally they were going to use flames because they couldn't really figure out a way of convincingly doing the Dalek blaster fire. So they were going to use flames, but they thought, no, that's far too terrifying for children. So they just settled on the fire extinguish people to death. But what do you think of like the overall? I mean, the '60s aesthetic and the bongo music, is all cool. But what about the alt take on the Doctor?
Oh man, I think as I've gotten older and seen more films with Peter Cushing in, like films where he plays a goodie and films where he plays a baddie, given how unpleasant William Hartnell is in those first few stories, the fact that Peter Cushing plays it a lot more cuddlier is a little bit disappointing because, you know, if you've seen like any of the Frankenstein films or even Star Wars, you just know how he can turn from charming to bastard with just a slight smile.
Yeah.
And you kind of want to see Peter Cushing just turn around and have that little bit of Hartnell-esque bastardry.
Yeah. He never shows any steel or grit, does he?
No.
Even to this day, the Peter Cushing Doctor annoyed me when I was a kid. Because even as a kid, even when I saw it like 6 or 7, I think instinctively I got that the Doctor was a fucking weirdo. Because, you know, at that age, I'm watching Tom Baker.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Peter Cushing Doctor, the fact that he's a lovable, slightly goofy but incredibly smart grandpa, yeah, a bit of a wasted opportunity there. You know, my personal favourite Peter Cushing performance is probably Twins of Evil, where he is wall to wall bad bastard. Throughout the entire film.
I have not seen Twins. I don't think I've seen any of that kind of later, more sexier period of Hammer.
Oh, Twins of Evil is extraordinarily sexy. But
okay.
It's also got a really superb Peter Cushing performance where he's essentially playing like a witchfinder kind of character, but of course he's the antagonist of the main vampire. So in a way, he's kind of the protagonist of the movie, but he's an awful bastard pretty much throughout the entire film. Yeah,
is he as awful
tremendous
as Vincent Price in Witchfinder General?
No. Oh, good lord, no. We only watched that last week, funnily enough. My friends Stu and Sarah got me a BFI player subscription for a year for my birthday a while back, so we finally activated and think, oh, what shall we watch? And there's the Werner Herzog Nosferatu's on there, and there's a few other things on there. There's quite a lot of good stuff on there, but I ended up spotting Witchfinder General, and Phil had never seen it, so I was like, yes, that's what we need. Yeah, I mean, most of the film is Ian Ogilvy riding horses really fast.
Yeah, but still,
stressed.
when Vincent Price he's like that's what you need.
Yeah,
I still haven't seen the Werner Herzog Nosferatu. I am really looking forward to the Robert Eggers remake coming out in a couple of weeks, because did you ever see The Lighthouse?
You know what? I got the Blu-ray and we put it. I have an off this time of year. I am terrible at staying awake. Here in Bradford, it's dark at 4:30. And it wasn't this year, actually. I think it was last year or the year before we got it in the run-up to Christmas. And I tried to watch it twice and fell asleep both times about 30 minutes in. So whilst I was enjoying it, and I didn't fall asleep because I was bored, I fell asleep because it was this time of year.
Yeah.
I just never got round to going back to watch it again.
Oh, God. It was one of the last few films I saw in the cinema before COVID shut everything down. And it just has that one beautifully stark black and white photography that just looks amazing on the big screen, and just Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe are just because he's in all like the Teen Vampire and the Wizard movie, you forget just how incredibly versatile and strange that Robert Pattinson can be.
I think it's amazing. I've never watched the Twilight movies. I'm dimly aware of them because they were part of the zeitgeist. Phil likes her Harry Potter, and I've seen the Harry Potter films when she's got them on Blu-ray for Christmas or something, but I'm usually got one eye on something else, so I understand he was in it. I can't say I ever spotted him in it, but he was absolutely incredible in a French sci-fi film, I think called High Life, which if you've not seen it, it's got
he plays like a space farmer, with his daughter on like a jungle planet, or am I thinking of a different film?
You're thinking of Pedro Pascal.
Okay.
I think, or you might be anyway. But no, High Life is I think it was directed by a French director, and it's got a really small cast that includes Mia Goth, and it is again it's sexually charged and vaguely unpleasant, but is a really really good movie. And I think he's a guy who just has a lot of fun challenging himself and usurping people's expectations of him. So whenever I see him, I'm always quite impressed by him. He popped up in a film called, is it The King? Andy Darby mentioned this to me the other day and said, have you seen The King on Netflix? And Timothée Chalamet plays Henry V, and it's got the Battle of Agincourt in it.
Okay.
And it's actually a really good film. But when you finally get to France, Robert Pattinson plays the young French king, and he just plays him as a louche, slimy wanker. It's fantastic. It's only a really small role, and he's not in it for long. but it is absolutely brilliant. He's a greasy, louche, cowardly prick. It's absolutely amazing.
Oh.
Yeah, no, I like Pattinson a lot. I thought he was a fairly decent Bruce Wayne as well.
Yeah,
Even though I've got issues with the film, but I
I've
thought
got
he was
issues
good
with
in
the
it.
film. It was quite funny. There's a scene in the lighthouse where he has a dream sequence where he fucks a mermaid. And I think that was the point where I was just saying to myself, truly, he can now play the Batman.
Yeah. You know what? I've got to go back and watch it now.
Yeah.
Gotta go. Anyway, you know what? We've been at it for 20 minutes already, and we still haven't started on this book that we've got to finish. So, The Coming of the Terraphiles Part 3, subtitle, We Must Finish It. Just point out that you're on a nice diet pop because it's very early in the day for you, but just in case anybody's interested who listens to this in what I'm actually drinking, because it's a Sunday evening for me, it's been a stressful weekend, so I am drinking some kind of weird Northern Monk collaboration between Northern Monk, Neon Raptor, Resident Culture Brewing Company, and Pohala, and it's a dark and wild dessert stout, 8.4%, Chinook, Ella, cacao, cherry, vanilla. And you know what? It's all right. So there we go.
Okay.
Got that out of the way.
Honestly, I think for like if 90% of the audience are like me, it's honestly half the anticipation of seeing what strange concoction you found in the back corner of a Lundis 6 months ago.
In this case, it was what I could find in a box in the corner of the kitchen, left over from the last time Loz was over, with the weird beers that I bought at a newsagent's up the hill from us in a place called Carverley, which looks very much like a mini Londis, but has a wonderful corner of bizarre beers. Which I think he must be sponsored by Northern Monk or something, because everything seems to be Northern Monk at the moment. But you know what? That's all right.
Yeah.
I can go with that. That's pretty good. But anyway, Frank and Freddy Force, Frank stroke Freddy Force, not Frank and Freddy, Frank stroke Freddy Force, and the Antimatter Men have been rebuffed for now. People, if you've got no fucking idea what we're talking about when we talk about Frank stroke Freddy Force and the Antimatter Men, I refer you back to parts 1 and 2 of our Coming of the Terraphile episodes. But they were after banning Cannon's ridiculously massive hat, but now it appears that only something may have been hidden in the hat and it's no longer there. The Doctor saved the day anyway, but the journey, the whimsy, must continue. And there is still space for Mike to insert some nice observations on the part of Amy, musing on the unique capabilities and qualities of the Doctor. So, Miles, I think our copies may have slightly different bindings and covers.
Yeah.
But I'm going to skip to page 158, which is the second page of chapter 13.
Yep.
The Doctor yawned. The chances of being attacked in the space lanes were gone for the time being, and everybody could relax. Or almost everybody. Because, of course, they were attacked by space pirates. Yeah. Again, refer to part 2. It's all good. For a while, he wrote calculations in tiny print in a little black notebook, his face twisting with the exertions of his massive brain. Drawing on life experiences denied most sentient creatures, he concentrated on the many complicated layers of existence, intratemporally occupying the same space, nesting one within the other, each generally invisible to the other. Only a few were blessed or damned with the Doctor's power to see the multiverse in all its vast, beautiful, bountiful, exotically coloured aspects, its glamouring glory. Those few knew how many truths could exist at once, the countless alternatives, the infinity of paradoxes, the billion twists of fate. That power only came with an understanding of how space could be a dimension of time, still hard for the average head to handle. That was why the Doctor could be so apparently nonchalant on occasions, frustratingly enjoying his insouciance when other people were going mad with terror. The ancestors of the first interstellar human voyagers, had been called guide sensors. They'd have the same talent as the Doctor. Sensors could plot courses through the cosmos others could not even detect. These were the people who had once mapped the multiverse and discovered another kind of space altogether. This other space was known as the Second Ether. There were stories that the Doctor had actually named the region, but he always denied it. Of those who travelled on that tiny splinter of red and yellow, turning gently end over end through space, only the Doctor could sense all the alternatives, weigh all the odds, and therefore make decisions impossible for anyone else. But he, better than anyone, knew that he was not infallible. The risks were horrible. He slipped his notebook back into his pocket and seemed to be sleeping with a look of astonishing serenity on his face. Watching him, Amy found herself imagining him as a speck of glowing indigo, locked in a single stitch at the centre of a swirling, glittering, multicoloured tapestry representing all possible versions of all possible events. The alternate planes of the multiverse, beginning and ending in dimensions too vast or too tiny for the human senses to comprehend. How was it, wondered Amy, that ordinary creatures like herself could be aware of such vastness, almost beyond comprehension, and still remain sane, still be concerned about their fate? How could you take yourself and your own desires and ambitions seriously, Amy wanted to know. How could you expect to have any effect at all on major events? Then she shrugged, as she had often shrugged before. The answer was, of course, very simple. In spite of your being so apparently insignificant, every action you or any other being took in the multiverse had meaning and effect, and was echoed in every other version of reality. Everyone was their own multiverse, just as the peak of Everest contained fragments that were models of the whole. A speck of indigo, a distant horn. In that wash of brilliantly coloured near-infinite geometry, reflecting on all the dangers which might threaten humanity, whose actions were mirrored and echoed almost to infinity, the Doctor, that twin-hearted, generous alien, had entered a world of near-infinite possibility. Amy did her best to imagine what he saw and all the possibilities of which he was aware. The Doctor was even now trying to work out the specifics of the threat against all the millions of worlds inhabited by intelligent species. He was doing what no computer could do. Not for the first time, her heart went out to him, the last of his kind. He no longer had a single equal he could talk to. Yet she was pretty sure he relished his life more than he mourned it. If only she could follow him into those rich and solitary places. She could probably help him to help himself, but she knew much of her motive was to do with how she envied him, and almost resented the fact that he would never be able to share his vision of the multiverse. Suddenly she felt shut out and alone. Would she ever see her old, ordinary, normal, shabby world again? I really enjoy the fact that now, cards on table. As this book goes, it does swing a little bit wildly between stuff like that and almost unrelentingly whimsical descriptions of strange tournaments.
Yep.
And various other bits and pieces. We'll probably talk about that a little bit more. But I love that this isn't just a stunt assignment by the BBC Books people. Even maybe it started that way, I don't know. But you really get the sense that Moorcock really, truly gets the uniqueness of the Doctor. Not just in a way that he wants to insert him into his oeuvre. But he gets it.
Yeah. It's a really, it's those small bits that kind of make the crossover of like how Doctor Who works with how late period post, second Ether post Moorcock kind of works.
Yeah.
I love that description of just the Doctor being the center of this huge tapestry which affects everything. It just makes me think back to the Christmas the Christmas Carol episode where Matt Smith has the wonderful line, "That's funny, I don't think I've ever met anyone who wasn't important."
Yeah. This is another really amazing thing about this book for me, and I think we have mentioned it on previous looks at this book, but he really gets the Matt Smith Doctor as well and his mannerisms.
Yeah.
And it is really, really easy to read all of the sections that include the Doctor, and it is absolutely Matt Smith leaping off the page. He gets Amy as well, rather well, but yeah, he absolutely gets Matt Smith down.
And that's really kind of surprising given that this book came out, 2010, so that was still, I think, when Matt Smith's first season would have still been either going or in production.
Well, I think Moorcock referred in that Guardian article to having seen the Matt Smith series, or maybe the first series. I don't know. I can't remember. We did talk about that interview last time out. But, it's all good stuff. And the book's entered its third stage now, or as if you kind of put this in the parlance of modern Who, it's a third distinct episode. This story, I think, would work really, really well packaged up as hour-long episodes of a multi-part story.
Yeah.
If only we had that option these days, like a 20-plus episode season like the old days of Star Trek or something like that, would be able to accommodate this kind of approach really, really nicely. I mean, obviously, it'd be quite difficult budget-wise, because even with a modern Disney budget, it would be really difficult to realise some of the things that are going on in this. Do it with cardboard sets. Just do it with modern budget worth of cardboard sets and rubbish models. But so in episode 1, it kind of kicked off with localised Woodhouseian farce, this strange sort of comedy of manners with a riotous overlay of colour and detail, and a hat heist. And then episode 2 was the localized story aboard a starship, complete with a pirate attack, the encounter with Frank Stroke Freddy Force and his antimatter men. And now we've got episode 3, which will blow the scale wide open with vast starports, planetary vistas as they reach Desiree. I don't know what that might be a reference to, other than a breed of potato. Not a breed, a variety. And the Doctor's focus shifts to the need to secure the Arrow of Law, and we eventually do find out what the Arrow of Law is. Oh, we won't spoil that for now. But after rendezvousing with and taking cabins on this huge multiple moon-sized cruise line of the Gargantua, which we find was commissioned by Meng and Eka, built by M&S, and fitted by John Coolart, so a couple of nice references there to some older and newer Moorcock muckers, they observe that the nearby planet of Pangloss, formerly a planet of cultural significance and tourist interest, is blackened and utterly dead. So there's a mystery there. Something sinister and powerful is in their path. And soon they find themselves aboard the Gargantua, headed for Migia. As we've said before, Migia is the heart, or near the hub of the multiverse, at the heart of the ghost worlds. More references to old Moorcocky stuff there.
Is Migia the planet from the Sundered Worlds?
It's such a long time since I've read the Sundered Worlds, but it may well be. But Migia also goes on to be a name of one of the Lords of Law in the pantheon of Law versus Chaos. We probably should read the Sundered Worlds. The Sundered Worlds, of course, aka the Blood Red Game, has been on the to reread list for this for a long time. But we get direct references to it later on because Renark of the Rim is directly tied into this further down the line when they actually reach Migia. And on the way, they get consumed by a terrible time storm, and Amy, whilst experiencing multiple versions of herself and her lives, some remembered, some not, has something of an epiphany. She was in her police uniform, running for the TARDIS. She was in the High Street beauty parlour, wondering how to tell them she didn't like their cut. She was in the TARDIS reading an Agatha Christie. She was getting ready to go to sleep. She was running across a limestone pavement in the Yorkshire Dales, and there was a pack of word-painted Iceni coming after her. When had this happened? She couldn't remember. Now she was sitting at a desk, writing. Now she was outside the spaceship. This spaceship. The Gargantua. The plumber was lecturing her on a proper maintenance of a hot water heater, and she was a creature of air and darkness slipping somehow through a gap in the hull which only she could see or use. She was big. An undine as big as the universe and able to see galaxy after galaxy after galaxy all streaming towards an invisible source of gravity. A supermassive, infinitely tiny presence, smaller and heavier than any black hole at the centre of any single galaxy. She realised this presence was the nucleus, and everything else was moving according to its extraordinary density, its immeasurable gravity. And suddenly she was heavy too, watching as she spun clusters of galaxies in her gigantic hands, blew out the flames and the heat of suns, made chains of white dwarf stars and played bowls with quasars until she sat under a tree in a park, perhaps in Africa, as lazy lions licked their chops and moved their heads to show they were ignoring her. She was a soldier in Afghanistan, desperately trying to reach cover as she crawled from her wrecked tank. She was a little girl, an old lady, and suddenly, after millennia, herself, her own age, and still the huge ship bucked and rocked and spun like a stick being thrown from hand to hand. And she realised that size was an illusion, that it did not matter how big or heavy or fast anything was, it was all relative, for the multiverse around her only got smaller and smaller in some directions, bigger and bigger in others, and that she had just as much effect on this quasi-infinite environment as a sentient being, a fraction of her size, or someone living in a universe vastly bigger than this one. She understood that it had something to do with self-similarity. Her actions affected every aspect of the multiverse, were echoed on every plane, every alternative. Whatever danger threatened them from now would threaten them everywhere. These other universes were no more independent to the presence to which they were drawn than her Earth was independent of the sun. It had nothing to do with size. If she pushed, the whole multiverse responded. If she slept in this aspect of herself, then she probably slept in all other aspects. How many were there? Millions? Billions? Probably. But this was also true of the Doctor, who she could see now doing something with his sonic screwdriver. The ship divided and became many ships, each one a fraction bigger than the next, each one containing an Amy, but not a Doctor. Where was he? Was he independent of the multiverse? The only one of his kind? This made sudden sense. Something began to come clear in her head as the ship's captain took hold of her arm. "Are you all right, miss?" He had interrupted her at the very point of understanding. "Ah, I do like that as well. I like this idea of the Doctor as some sort of unique monolith within the multiverse. It's so much more interesting than many of the efforts to make the character take on additional layers of power or whatever in modern Who, because they always tend to be sort of overly portentous and doom-laden, all of these modern efforts. But it really works for Matt Smith Doctor as well.
Yeah, it's there is, he's definitely a much more alien incarnation, despite all the kind of the kind of goofy affectation. I think he manages to do the old man in a young man's body with incredible physicality. And this entire section of Amy going through all herselves, Eriko's just looking at this and going, God, I wish mine were that easy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's just reminding me of like all the kind of bits in the Eriko's books when Eriko's just starts going, oh, I was Elric, I did terrible things. Oh, I was Jerry Cornelius, I did terrible things again. Yeah. I was Hawkwind, I was kind of boring in that one, and I did terrible things, and I long to be complaining about a gas heater.
This is a classic piece of Moorcock, isn't it? Like reflecting on your alternative lives. She does get to be a soldier crawling from under a wrecked tank in Afghanistan, which is, a little bit more like something you would have got from one of the Jerry Cornelius alternates, But I like how he's bringing this in. He's bringing elements in of his own approach to storytelling and things that we know and have experienced multiple times, as you say, from the Erikos reference. But again, for Matt Smith, I think it works really well. And as you just made a really good point about Matt Smith. We talked last time out about how two-note some of the recent Doctors have been. So, I don't know. I think I said that Unshuti I really like, but he veers too wildly between giggling inanely and stoically weeping. And I think there was an element of that with Tennant as well, where he was gurning or he was super portentous and doom-laden.
David Tennant asked the 10th Doctor, I grew to just kind of really get bored with, especially the woe is me. When he came back, I think I liked him a hell of a lot more.
Yeah.
I think he really kind of carried just the weight and age of the character. Yeah. And it was like, I like David Tennant as the 14th more than I like David Tennant as the 10th. Although, sadly, David Tennant is the only actor who's played the Doctor who I've gotten a chance to meet. And he was lovely. He was absolutely lovely. He was absolutely lovely. Yeah. But, I have nothing bad to say about David Tennant as an actor. It's just the character of the 10th Doctor, it rubbed me the wrong way. No matter how good he and Catherine Tate were when on screen together.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you about that 14th Doctor 3 stories. I thought they were really good. I thought his performance was great. And Catherine Tate was really good in those as well. But you made the point about Matt Smith being a lot more nuanced than almost anybody else who's played the Doctor since it came back. I don't think we could really judge Eccleston properly on 10 episodes or however many it was. He had his moments. But he was super balanced. And he could be in the moment with any of the activities, with any of his companions and any of his passing characters, yet for such a young guy, for such a young actor, I think Unshuti Gatwa is younger than Matt Smith was when he started, is that right?
Yeah.
So at the time, he was the youngest guy by a mile. Yet he still managed to have an aura, like he was something else, like existing. Even when he's saying, I want fish fingers and custard, he just still had this sense of being somebody unusual and slightly odd and off the wall. And that's what all the best Doctors had. Yeah. It wasn't confected, they just had it. They had that quality.
He was my favourite modern Doctor until until the Peter Capaldi Doctor got the guitar. And the moment the Capaldi Doctor has the guitar, it's like, yep, he now has like this character hook. He's now like this aged rock and roller just kind of busting his way through time and space. And I love Capaldi as the Doctor.
Yeah, Capaldi's eyebrows alone are probably a better Doctor Who than some of the other people who've played him in recent years, and maybe even in the classic series. Because, again, as was discussed before, there are a couple of the Doctors from the classic series that I wasn't really enamoured of towards the end. Yeah. But yeah, I'm almost tempted to go back and watch some Matt Smith. I won't, because I don't want to be disappointed. But in one of those interviews we did reference last time, I'm sure Moorcock said that he liked Matt Smith's Doctor and responded to him. And you can see that in this novel because it feels really keenly attuned to that specific incarnation of the Doctor. I think when it's good, it's great, but it does feel a little bit swingy, and even more so in this second half of the book, going from all this stuff to all of a sudden 3 pages about Mrs. Banning Cannon finding a new milliner aboard the Gargantua. And the more I read it, the more I appreciate it and find myself lost to its pretty unique charms as a book. But it's so heavily referential, and in place it's almost Ouroboros-like in its methods and influences. But it still manages to be unlike almost anything I've ever read because of its dedication to that particular combination of tone and premise. I don't think I've ever read anything like this book.
No, basically in the last week since we finally confirmed ourselves down to finishing this bad boy, I reread the entire second half of the book.
Yeah.
In preparation. Like, I think every time I've now reread it, I now kind of get the sort of the book's tone and what it's going for just a little bit more.
Yeah.
Which, is great for rereading, but if you haven't, like, I remember when, I think it was you and Loz who were reading out the 1-star reviews.
That's right.
And the moment they mentioned the hat theft, like, yep, I know which one that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's...
Yeah, I do understand why Doctor Who fans who want to read their IP fiction struggled with this.
Yeah, and I like I said, I think way in part 1, I think my struggle was the other way around because I wanted something closer to, say, The Winds of Limbo or The Sundered Worlds. And what I essentially got was more closer to Dances at the End of Time. And it was just like, I wanted something more, what I felt the kind of peak Moorcock was, which is this very sort of dark toned big ideas and a lot of strangeness, like things like the Fire Clown. Or even just like the Black Corridor, even although like a Doctor Who novel written in the style of the Black Corridor would be interesting but insane. Yeah,
it would. And I also think that the Black Corridor is too... I don't know if it means...
Obtuse?
I don't know, I was going to say, I don't think mean-spirited is the right word, but maybe it is. The Black Corridor has a deeply mean streak buried within it that I don't think would work as a Doctor Who story because you would have to lighten up certain elements to make it work as a Doctor Who story.
The Black Corridor, I think, is too nihilistic.
Yeah, that's a much better way of putting it than I could. Yeah, it's extraordinarily nihilistic.
And Doctor Who is no stranger to nihilism. That's a good chunk of the Eric Sayward era of the 80s. Yeah. Pretty much summed up, which is like my period of Doctor Who, which is just kind of thumbs down, because if you want to get me bored on Doctor Who, it's okay, let's have a bunch of troopers running around a corridor set we actually took from Pinewood that they used in Aliens and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and Red Dwarf, and just shoot at some Cybermen. It's like, nope, you lost me.
Or have some of them gruesomely melted into green goo that's still smoking when they find them. Yeah,
and still whimpering. That said, one of my favorite Fifth Doctors is Terminus, which is 100% dicking around a metal space station set, but at the same time, it's doing all the strangeness of kind of doing Wagner meets Alien. It's trying to do like the weird Prometheus space engineer stuff from Alien, but falls apart in execution because Stephen Gallagher's ideas are a bit too strange for the show to visually realize.
Right. I remember the name of the episode, the story Terminus, but I can't remember anything else about it because I don't think I've seen it probably since it was broadcast. When it comes to the Peter Davison stuff, again, probably picking them up on DVDs, I've never worked through them on iPlayer or even BritBox when we were doing it, because I found Peter Davison just so incredibly patchy at the time in terms of... So the ones I have gone back and watched are probably the nasty ones, like Resurrection of the Daleks, like... Earthshock, which is the one where Davros gets his hand blown off. That's a Colin Baker one, isn't it? That's Revelation.
That's Revelation. Resurrection was my favorite Doctor Who at like 15.
Yeah.
But because it's full of all the stuff a 15-year-old kind of likes, me, you're like, man, there's death and there's grimness and there's people melting and going green. And now I'm just like, God, this is boring. This is like not fun.
Yeah. Back in the days when people could smirk on spaceships as well. Well,
Oh,
they're
God.
smirking on the bridge.
I've been reading Inherent the Stars by James P. Hogan, and I was just struck by the amount of people who are working on a moon base who are just casually lighting up as if it's the most normal thing in the world. I'm like, okay, come on. Oxygen is expensive, guys.
Yeah. Then those cigarettes are smoking as well. The bridge crew, they're like those really slim, long cigarettes that became really fashionable. I think the brand was called Moore. They were like long, brown, and very thin. And the owner of a music venue in Hull called the Adelphi always smoked them. I don't know if he smoked them because he thought they made him look more hip and down with it. I don't know. But yeah, I do remember seeing them and going, they're smoking more, surely. Anyway, the Doctor saves the Gargantua and everybody aboard from this weird time storm by sending a distress signal to Captain Abberley and his bubbly boys. And the liner escapes. Yeah, so just in case any Doctor Who fans are reading this who haven't got a clue what they're in for, Captain Abberley and his bubbly boys. And they were in it last time, actually. We did talk about them briefly last time out. But the liner escapes the storm into the second ether. So we've had that reference to the second ether. And we've spoke before about this is very Woodhouse. It's very Dances at the End of Time in tone. But now he's introducing Who readers directly to perhaps one of the more divisive elements of his oeuvre, the second ether trilogy. The Chaos Engineers and Captain Quelch in Ketchup Cove. Quelch and Co. feature the first time in Blood of Southern Fantasy, first in a very loose trilogy that includes Fabulous Harbours and The War Amongst the Angels. 3 books I'm long overdue to reread and reappraise, but full disclosure, I struggled with at the time due to the structure of the storytelling.
They're also very prominent in one of the 3 kind of storylines in the Moorcock's multiverse.
That's right, yeah.
DC series, which is where I first encountered them. I mean,
yeah,
fantastic art by Walt Simonson. I had no bloody clue what was going on.
I collected the comics as they came out individually, so I've got all 12 issues. I think there was an issues era as well, so I've got them kicking around in here somewhere. I remember going back and reading it again, see if it made any more sense, and it didn't.
Nope.
Really. And it also doesn't feel like it ends. It feels like there's an issue 13 completely missing. Yeah, so if anybody's interested, there's a new collection available in hardcover. I think Titan have reprinted it in hardcover. Is it in 2 parts?
It's in 2 parts.
In 2 parts. So it's available in hardcover. I might dive back in at some point with the comics and reread, because I'm a big lover of John Ridgway, and there's an Elric story with art by John Ridgway in it, which I remember reading and just thinking, oh, what is this?
What's going on?
What is this? Why is it here? What does it mean? Oh, yeah.
It's here because Elric sells.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you read the second Ether trilogy?
Oh God, like 20 years ago now, when I was still in university. I didn't understand a single bloody word of it. I picked them up in the last few years, and like you, I'm due a reprisal. But I just remember how dense that first volume was.
Oh, God.
And a lot of it is kind of repeated in the multiverse comic. With the second ether stuff, and then it will go to Corsairs of the Second Ether, and it is I found it like the most incomprehensible of pulp fiction. It's all the cliches about science fiction being incomprehensible.
Yeah,
that you could throw at a wall.
I think if you're introduced to the second ether and Captain Quelch and Co. through this book, good luck. Good luck trying to figure this shit out. Because I don't think you've got a chance in hell. But, you know, Captain Abberley and the Bubbly Boys are appropriately daft. A little bit of fun. And then the return to the Gargantua, leave the second ether again, and the Doctor gives a big explanation of how the multiverse works and how they must maintain the balance. Now, there's some reading for you here, because there's some Doctor dialogue.
Okay.
But I can't decide whether this is just too on the nose.
You know how my people, that is, could live a very long time, don't you?
You sort of explained it, but I didn't really understand. Kind of like some reptiles or insects. In spite of the seriousness of the situation, he grinned.
You make parthenogenesis sound so attractive.
He touched a screen to bring up another sector.
Well, that form of regeneration is also what the universe does. In fact, it's not just the universe, but all scales of the multiverse. Some cultures have observed this about fully understanding it. They call it the Great Recreation, the conjunction of the million spheres, all sorts of fanciful names. At a natural point in her cycle, the multiverse begins a process of recreation to make herself afresh. There is an exchange of sorts. Some matter becomes antimatter, law becomes chaos. Everything, well, almost everything, is reversed. This happens so slowly, most sentient creatures hardly notice it. Evolution. Some intelligences will often work out what's happening. It's not a secret. It's a constant ongoing process, and it guarantees our existence. Multiversal immortality, if you like.
So it's not exactly immortality, not the kind where we remember all that we've learned or all that's happened.
Right, not that kind. Even Time Lords couldn't recall everything from a former existence. I certainly can't. Anyway, that's the fundamentals of life and regeneration in the multiverse. It's a fine equilibrium regulated by what some people call the balance. A semi-abstract visualization which can be said to act like the beam, fulcrum, and pans on an ordinary pair of old-fashioned scales to maintain everything in equilibrium.
I'm still having a hard time getting my head around it.
Well, to put it as simply as I can, somehow, through interference or by somebody or something, the process of regeneration has been speeded up so much that parts of the process have not had a chance to develop and degenerate and therefore regenerate naturally. It feels as if the balance has been pulled apart instead of expanding and contracting as it should. The multiverse has gone out of kilter. These storms are partly the result of antimatter infecting matter. Matter is corrupting antimatter. Law is infecting chaos, and chaos is infecting law. We need to find out why. And we have to restore the balance, otherwise the entire cosmos will become infected until it rapidly degenerates and collapses into inchoate matter, nothingness. The conquest of death over life. Anything remaining sensate long enough to witness this process will live that moment of dying forever. To quote William Hartnell, Christ is like bloody Hamlet.
You're doing a grand job. You're doing a grand job. But you've got one more paragraph to get through. So she shuddered. And what would have happened to the rest of us before it came to that?
Hard to say. With the destruction of time comes the collapse of space.
He was still checking the screens as he spoke.
Nothing pleasant. A few hundred years at most in which the multiverse will witness some really horrible permutations.
He looked up at the screens again.
I mean, really horrible stuff. Mutations that would make us mad just by glancing at them. Chaos and law in their extremes.
He checked off figures on another screen.
I can't help thinking that Frank/Freddy Force has something to do with this. Those lawbirds always believe they know better than the rest of us. It's in their nature to impose. Takes one to know one. Chaos prefers to go with the flow. Like Captain Aberley and the Bubbly Boys. That's how they travel. Frank/Freddy and his law don't mind about the damage they cause in the fabric of time and space. Like driving a straight flat highway through forests and hills and towns, careless of whatever destruction is created. They make holes in the multiverse. Their ships shred it, turn it into scraps.
Yeah, so the reason why I said, is this too on the nose? It's because this is, whilst it's enjoyable, this is the Doctor essentially engaging in 2 pages of exposition that explain the entire cosmology of Moorcock's multiverse and how it all works. It's basically explained there. The end of Elric's world is explained, all sorts of different things.
And now, when coming to Terraphiles, Michael Moorcock takes 2 pages to explain how the quest for Tanlorn ends.
That's right. But it does establish firmly and unambiguously that the Doctor is an agent of the balance. I've got to say that the description of the balance and the pans and the fulcrum, I did roll my eyes a little bit and think, oh, really, this is far too on the nose. Reminds me in a way of, I remember years and years and years ago, going back 30 odd years when we got the Elric exclamation mark role-playing game. And there was a scenario in the back and I decided to run it by reading it for 30 seconds before we started and not actually doing any proper homework. And it's some guys in a marketplace on the Isle of Purple Towns, and the way into the game for the players is there's a guy in the marketplace weighing people on a giant set of scales, and they tip according to how aligned to law and chaos they are. I remember Loz going, "Oh, fuck off." Loz was playing, it was like, really? And yeah, I kind of got that sense when I was reading that a little bit. But As I say, it does unambiguously establish the Doctor as an agent of the balance. This is a full-on IP mashup. Migia is a constant in the universe, like a cosmic Tanalorn analog, perhaps, and someone or something out there is bent on destroying it all. And the Doctor sent the TARDIS warping off as a distraction whilst they get to Migia using the Terraphile reenactors as a cover. And as you pointed out, the most feared pirate in the multiverse turns up to shake them down, Captain Cornelius, aka Iron Face. And we're not going to read any of this because if we do, we'll be here till Sunday, till next Sunday. What follows is the longest chapter of the book, and again, it's another massive exposition dump in some ways, but I kind of like it. I think it's kind of cool. It sets up the Iron Face, i.e. Captain Cornelius, and the Doctor have this long, storied history, and it establishes that quite nicely. And so we've also got these two MacGuffins of the story so far, the Arrow of Artemis and all these references to the regulator or rugulator, depending on who's talking about it, which will regulate and stop the dark tides which are causing havoc. There's also dim references to there might be two arrows of Artemis, which in itself is not necessarily an arrow. It's the substance of them that matter, and they've taken many forms through the countless cycles of the multiverse. Cups, even swords.
Don't they refer to a staff, like the rune staff, at some point?
Yep. That's earlier in the book. They refer to it as possibly a staff. So it seems to take on various different forms. But as we know, it could be Stormbringer 1 week, it could be Mournblade, it could be the rune staff, it could be the Arrow of Artemis. So Moorcockian are all over the shop. But I do like the relationship between the Doctor and Iron Face, the history. I think the series actually needs more of this, more new, interesting protagonists that bring a weight of history behind them.
Yeah.
You know? Not horny time agents with D20s on their spaceship consoles. But Miles, question. Would Unshooty Doctor's horny time agent boyfriend guy just have been Jack Harkness had John Barrowman not been outed as a creep?
God, I don't. If only because of the age difference between the two actors, I would have to say probably no. Because also, if Rogue was actually Jack Harkness all along, then you don't have the element of distrust, because it's Jack Harkness. He's on another, he's on a wacky time agent adventure or a wacky Torchwood adventure.
But there was a distrust element in the first appearance of Jack Harkness, wasn't there?
Yeah.
It all felt like a lot of recycling, all of that stuff. You know, it felt like they were recycling things, but things have moved on to the point now where they can just go, fuck it, Doctor Who Mansnog. You know, whereas they couldn't do that with Jack.
No.
At the time, it was too much. Yeah, a little bit of recycling. But that aside, we've talked about how New Who has taken regular steps in effort to hotshot major lore developments to variable success.
I think sometimes the trouble with modern Who, or at the very least, especially Doctor Who since the 90s when the novels were coming out, is that with any kind of Doctor Who made post 1989, there is that problem of the inmates are running the asylum, and so you get those huge lore dumps, you get those very pretentious reframing as the Doctor, instead of just being like this Patrick Troughton, this crazy anarchist who bums around time and space looking for empires to topple, that he's some sort of champion of time or incarnation, or just he's a bigger thing than what the character initially was. And that's definitely one of the problems I have with modern Who, as much as I enjoy it. It is that kind of almost the deificate, the love that the writers and the fans have for Doctor Who almost become textual into the universe itself, especially with the Moffat era, when if the Doctor's not around, the universe is just going to collapse in upon itself because it doesn't have the Doctor to maintain it. And I'm just I miss when he was and I get why people would like that, but I'm just kind of I miss this crazy, watching William Hartnell in sequence. I'm man, I just missed when a Doctor was this crazed elderly kleptomaniac, just going around time and space, just just like running into problems, sorting them out because he's there and that's the only way he gets the TARDIS back. And occasionally he either steals some people or he nicks some clothes. He is just this grubby anarchist, just kind of just getting into trouble.
Yeah. Give us the cosmic hobo back.
Yeah. And sometimes the kind of the especially with like the Seventh Doctor, where he's very much just manipulating events around him to get the outcome. There's also the element of, for all his being this manipulator, the Doctor's also really bad at it, because every time he's working out these grand plans, something turns up straight away which completely cocks up everything. And he has to then kind of improvise on the fly, but do it in such a way that when he makes the landing, he can just kind of look good and just go, yep, I planned that the entire time.
Yeah. I don't think they have been at all successful for me with the lore developments, and I absolutely agree that making the Doctor into some godlike figure paints you into a corner.
It becomes that problem of scale, and that you have to keep up. Like if the end of your season is a million Daleks about to destroy far future Earth, then how do you top that? Well, Daleks versus Cybermen. Okay, how do you top that? Well, the Master summons the far future humanity back in time to destroy the world after making himself Prime Minister, but the Doctor is able to kind of make it all work out, and then how do you go from there? Davros is going to wipe out time itself. Yeah. Where do you go from there? Big Bang 2. Yeah. And it's like that the Lensman sliding scale of, you have to keep upping the ante until the point where the ante becomes utterly ludicrous. And it's like, especially with long running characters and like with superhero comics, sometimes Batman is just punching the Joker in an alley. Other times he's helping the Justice League take down the personification of evil in the DC universe. And then after that, he's punching the Riddler in an entirely different alley. You can't always escalate. You have to learn when to kind of pull back. And this is where, like modern Who, the format was very much inspired by Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But even then, Buffy, I remember, seemed to know when to kind of pull back on the scale and make sure that at the end of the day, it still focused the characters. And I feel that's the one thing that with Russell T Davies' stuff, is that when the larger cosmology of what's going on doesn't always work, and sometimes there's a little, the Doctor flicked the convenient switch which solves the problem. As long as you have it framed in the drama of the characters, you can pull off the trick. Like, yes, the Doctor and Rose defeat the Daleks and Cybermen by pulling two levers on other sides of the room and sucking all the Daleks and Cybermen into a void dimension, but Rose gets trapped in an alternate universe and the Doctor can't get her back. Like, that doesn't always work. And with Moffat, I feel like the character stuff kind of got subsumed by having it be these big, complex, temporal mechanic Rube Goldberg machines of making sure you're going, I didn't understand step 1, but what I thought was step 1 was actually step 5. And then does it all kind of pull off at the very end? Yeah. As well as hotshotting lore developments and expanding the scale and importance of the Doctor as an entity and all that stuff, I think what this book is driving home to me as well, just by introducing and having a 7 or 8 page chapter of dialogue between Iron Face and the Doctor, which establishes them as having a history. And there's an offhand reference to last seeing him some kind of adventure in a mine in 1907 near Newcastle, and you instantly in one sentence can think, there's a whole 4-part 1970s Doctor Who serial there, where it's probably John Pertwee. It's John Pertwee in a mine, and he's fighting, I don't know, the Quarks.
Yeah, I think it says leopard men, something in the text. Yeah, but it also drives home to me that we've not really seen modern Who being good at creating new adversaries with any degree of depth and heft.
No.
Not necessarily adversaries, but also, the thing about Cornelius stroke Iron Face is potentially an adversary or an ally, depending on the specific scenario that they find themselves in. Okay, we in the past, we've had the Master, and they've endlessly recycled the Master in New Who. Again, Missy notwithstanding, I think largely poorly. I think they started with Derek Jacobi, and for all of 10 minutes, he was the greatest Doctor since Roger Delgado. Sorry, the greatest Master since Roger Delgado. And then, they ruined that but with all the John Sims stuff that you just referred to.
I like John. It helps like that John Sims and David Tennant have a good chemistry for like the smallest amounts of time we actually see them together on an equal footing. And as much as I don't like the last David Tennant story, it has enough moments between John Sims and David Tennant where it's just like, yeah, this feels like the Doctor and the Master at this point. But at the same time, it's like the classic series, most of its iconic baddies it lucked into, and any attempts it tried to replicate its success also ended up being usually failures more than they were successes. Like
I would love to see New Who introduce an interesting antagonist who the Doctor could have a love-hate relationship with over a protracted period of time. It would be wonderful. Give us some continuity of characters, because the only characters we've got any continuity with are the Kate Lethbridge Stewart types, and they're all one-dimensional.
Yeah, you kind of need that that unit family of the Pertwee era of having just this very expanded cast and having these very different kind of relationship mechanics. You've got the Doctor, you've got Joe, you've got the Brigadier, you've got Mike Yates and Sergeant Benton, who are upper class and lower class respectively. Yeah. And then you've just got the Master just dancing around like a panto dame up to his evil schemes this week.
Yeah, but I mean, even Roger Delgado Master, he didn't scene chew like the modern incarnations, who seem to have to be because they've got a limited amount of screen time and a limited number of episodes. They just seem to dial it up to 11.
Yeah, they're going more for the Anthony Ainley than the Roger Delgado.
Yeah, that's a shame. But yeah, I mean, we do need that stuff. And let's not forget that they had the balls to turn Mike Yates into a villain after like 3 years of appearances as well, which was kind of a cool thing that they did at the time.
That was a great Invasion of Dinosaurs is a great story. Malcolm Hulke usually gave us the best Pertwee stories.
Yeah. That's another one I need to go back and rewatch. Because I haven't seen it for years.
A good one for that one also is the Target audiobook, because that's read by Martin Jarvis, who has the audiobook voice like honey.
Oh, yeah. He's got a great voice, hasn't he? Yeah. Anyway, we move on to essentially episode 4 of this 4-episode story, Migia and the Ghost World. So Iron Face and the Doctor have a truce of sorts. The arrival of the Gargantua and Cornelius' ship, the Pain, at Migia, drawing another explicit crossovers, because we get references to Radak and the black hole into which he disappeared, firmly tying Moorcock's The Blood Red Game, aka the Sundered Worlds, into the Doctor's continuity, such as it is.
You didn't mention how Captain Cornelius is dressed as a Commedia dell'arte Harlequin.
And he changes masks as well, doesn't he? He's got masks for all occasions, which I think is rather nice. And the Sundered Worlds, of course, being in 1965, Moorcock's initial foray into the multiverse as a story concept. So there's a little bit of full circle going on here. But that's only a bit of window dressing really now, because it's all about the tournament again. Oh, and Mrs. Banning-Cannon's hat was nicked again. And then found again. It starts to sag under its own weight of whimsy for me at this point. Particularly the Doctor's first involvement in the tournament, which is a 5-page description of him engaging in a nut-cracking contest versus 2 Jadoon. Most of this book has consisted of stuff I would love to see in New Who, but a blow-by-blow account of a nut-cracking contest this close to the end of the story, which in a 1-hour episode would probably take up 5 or 10 minutes of it. Not so
2
much.
minute a 2 minute montage about. I would love to see I think we said this back in part 1. I want to see the Jadoon in cricketing gear.
And whack it.
Yeah,
pants.
that's the kind of strange whimsy that you want from Doctor Who, which is that juxtaposition of the utterly mundane with the strange and terrifying.
Yeah, I think you're right. Fortunately, things do get more interesting when Miggy and the Ghost World start to move sideways through the multiverse and everything gets crazy psychedelic. And there is a nice bit where you get the Doctor's conclusion that in spite of what the universe or the multiverse throws at us, we must continue our routines and rituals and try to maintain them because that's how we get restarted again. Obviously, it's more detailed than that. It goes on for about 3 paragraphs, but it's very the Doctor. And the tournament continues, albeit under challenging circumstances. More stuff happens, re-hats and marriage proposals and sing-alongs in the pub. And then there comes a point...
I just want to mention one of my favourite parts, which I think even the plot is tired of Mrs. Banning Cannon's hat.
Yeah.
Because everyone's in the pub having a drink. Banning Cannon walks in and basically just asks, people to help her find a hat. Everyone just promptly leaves.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She says, "Oh, and here's our heroic Doctor," and the Doctor goes, "Yeah, I got to go to bed," and pisses off. Leaves her to it. Yeah. But there comes a point where I fully understand again why a lot of Who fans really struggle with this book because even as a Moorcock guy, it gets testing because the second ether comes back into play. You actually sent me a screen grab of this page a couple of days ago. So it says, "Then came a massive throbbing from what seemed the core of the planet's being. The sun began to sing a wild song that sent out ripples of music visible in the air they breathed. The mere act of breathing caused them to absorb some of the notes until at last virtually every living creature on the planet was adding its song to the complex harmonies, and the sky was full of planets. Planet after planet stretching into infinity, sun into sun folding into one another. Larger and larger and at the same time smaller and smaller. They watched a vast stretch of green-white curd curl around a corner and disappear. The Doctor began cheering, his arms around Amy. He came close to kissing the team captain because he recognised the tentacle for what it was. 'We made it,' he said. 'We're in the second ether. That's Squid Mammy's spill. And look!' He danced along the pavilion's deck, pointing. From out of the green-white tentacle emerged a tiny little steamboat, her paddles churning against the splashing colour, her captain in his wheelhouse, booming out a song. 'We're rolling, rolling to the Rugalator Rumba. We're dancing to the doom of the Dumbledrum Samba. How's the music going down there, Mr. Capybara? Fill up the campers, let's boogie with the thunder.' But it wasn't Captain Aberley. Instead, a long insectoid face with a V-shaped mouthpart, a set of sunglasses with 8 lenses, and a scarlet mohawk put its head out of the wheelhouse and waved at the Doctor. 'Good to see you, Doctor. To woo-da-doo. How's life treating you?' 'Good enough, thanks. More than it. All well, I hope. Never better, Doctor. I heard you were looking to score the arrow today. You do a bit of jiggery-pokery for us?' 'Hoping, young it, with the rest of our game to play. You're safe enough at the centre for the time being if you don't mind over vivid colours. They make my eyes ache, you know. Do your best, partner, and spread the world if you don't mind. I was hoping Captain A and the Bubbly Boys would have something for me.' And off it goes, and the paddle steamer wheels off into the sky.
That it turns into bloody Yellow Submarine.
It's like... put yourself into a position of a non-Moorcock reader, reading a Doctor Who novel, and thus far persevering, and even tuning in to the tone and force of Mike's concept. But at this point, it really is going full, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Or maybe it did ages ago. I don't know. But yeah. Anyway, things do rattle to a conclusion via a series of reveals once they win the Arrow of Artemis. And I'm not sure my brain is correctly wired on any number of reads to pick up on the clues, but I'm sure dedicated Sexton Blake readers might have done. But there's lots of exposition. The Doctor knew what was going on, sort of. Some other things were happening, sort of. There's a heroic sacrifice to restore the balance when Bingo Loxley gets the bow of Diana, because W.G. Grace, the female W.G. Grace member of the Wacket team, has had a mysterious bow the entire time, which there have been a couple of references to. Turns out to be the bow of Diana, and the arrow of Artemis, which we find out is the span of the balance which attaches to the fulcrum and to which the pans are attached, needs to be fired into the black hole. And Bingo Loxley does it.
He does the old fantastic, punch the Doctor. The end of Ark in Space when the miner goes, "Sorry, Doctor, you can't, you don't want to mess with the Union." Punches the Doctor out, sits in a locker, does the heroic sacrifice.
Yeah.
I honestly, this was on the most recent reread. This Bingo sacrifice at one point generally feels moving after being a Woodhouseian kind of bore as played by Hugh Laurie. At the very end, he does the heroic thing, and the book refers to him as Robin of Loxley, Earl of Sherwood, as he launches the arrow, saves the day after proposing to Amy turning him down.
Yeah.
And then
Amy turns him down, so he kills himself by firing the arrow of Artemis into a black hole with the bow of Diana. I guess if you get rejected, that's a way to go, isn't it?
I mean, if you get rejected by Karen Gillan, it's just like, yep, this is how I'm going.
Yeah, okay. So I suppose there's an element of understandability to that.
Yeah.
And there's a happy ending for Flapper and Harry Agincourt, of course, which is all a little bit contrived, but what the hell. And Captain Cornelius turns up to evacuate everybody from having to stay on Migia for eternity. The end.
And it turns out the TARDIS was in the hat the whole time, or the TARDIS was in the Doctor's pocket.
The TARDIS was in the Doctor's pocket, but then he hid the Arrow of Artemis inside the TARDIS. And then he hid the TARDIS inside some kind of orb, and then he hid the orb inside Mrs. Banning Cannon's hat, but it wasn't there the whole time. It moved again sometime later, and Invisible Peggy, who's like a galactic thief, stole the hat successfully at one point. Because she's invisible, the hat stayed invisible so long as she was wearing the hat. So the hat was there for a long period of time, was actually around them and was on the ship with them, but Invisible Peggy was wearing the hat, therefore it's invisible. Yeah. All of the exposition in the last 25 pages that explained all of the mystery, I was like, what? What the fuck is going on?
I was kind of disappointed that Freddy Force.
Yeah.
Didn't turn up at the end, or it feels like the cosmology becomes almost overbearing to the story it's trying to tell, because you expect some kind of final attempt by the bad guys. It doesn't go to form, but there is part of you that's kind of like, but you expect this anticipation. You've introduced these interesting characters, and then if they're good, if you're familiar with Moorcock's oeuvre and the second ether, then hey, Frank Freddy Force, the Bubbly Boys, we gonna do anything spectacular with them? Not really. No.
Captain Quelch is mentioned a couple of times, doesn't really have any impact on anything. Frank Struck, Freddy Force seem to be set up as the antagonists. Barely see them again after Chapter 11. They're only referenced. Yeah, who is the villain of this piece?
Is the villain the resetting of the multiverse?
Yeah,
because
I'm still not clear who was causing it or driving it. Let's read it again. Right, we will reconvene in 2026 for the coming of the Terraphiles Part 4, where we reevaluate our lives and try and figure out what the fuck went on in this book.
Maybe this is all connected to the TV show and the cracks in space and the Big Bang. No.
Yeah. Well, you know what? On that, what a journey, Miles.
The book, third time round. The book's great. It's still not what I expect from either a Doctor Who novel written by Michael Moorcock or Michael Moorcock writing in the vein of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
I still think I need to read more P.G. Wodehouse, because I feel like a lot of the humor is based on an author I only know about by context.
I would say if you're going to dive into some Wodehouse, just pick up a couple of old Penguin copies. Not necessarily just Jeeves stuff. Read Smith in the City. Smith with a P. P. Smith. Why there's a silent P on Smith, I can't remember. But Smith in the City is great. Any of the Jeeves books, but probably Carry On Jeeves. Blandings Castle. Start with something like Carry On Jeeves.
Right.
And Smith in the City. And that'll give you a pretty good grounding in what's going on with the P.G. Wodehouse approach to humour and class.
That and then what Jerome K. Jerome, that kind of early 20th century upper class twits getting into scrapes.
Yeah, but with the beauty of the Jeeves books is Jeeves is totally unlike the Hugh Laurie and Stephen Fry series. Stephen Fry's Jeeves is fuck all like the Jeeves of the books. Give one a read.
Let's read the book.
They're short, easy reads. And Smith in the City just for a different Woodhouse character. But yeah, both really, really good. And both two of the books that English teacher of mine gave me back in the day when we were in Palamos. But yeah, well worth a look. But what a journey, Miles. That's probably 4.5 hours of discussion about the coming of the Terraphiles. And at the end, we couldn't figure out who the villain was. So this is why we need to probably give it a few more years, reread it, and then do part 4.
Oh god! Oh god! We're just gonna. That's our own personal multiverse. Is just rereading this book again and again and again.
Yeah, well, as the Doctor says, we have to basically continue our routines and rituals because if there is a reset of the multiverse or a conjunction of the million spheres, it's the only way we can re-establish any semblance of normality.
Ooh, okay. Sorry, I'm just looking. I'm currently looking. Carry On Jeeves is in stock at my local library, and I was going to go to that library tomorrow anyway. So
Lovely.
I'm going to kill two birds with one stone. Hopefully, pick up a whole bunch of Harryhausen films to watch.
Oh, nice.
My wife and I watched Valley of Gwangi this week.
Yeah.
And we was like, Rhiannon wants to check out some more Harryhausen. I'm like, okay. So I've got Jason and the Argonauts, which I've never seen myself.
Really? Oh,
really. I know.
Oh, you're in for a treat. You're in for a treat.
Clash of the Titans, which I've seen a whole bunch of times, and 1 million years BC.
Also a cracker.
Oh, also a cracker. But no, Valley of Gwangi was a lot of fun. Slow start, but when the dinosaur...
only Ray Harryhausen film to make me cry as a child. Yeah. When Gwangi kills the elephant.
Oh, yeah.
I wasn't happy.
Oh.
I was not happy as a child. I was traumatized by that as a wee nipper. Yeah. Well, you know what? The journey will continue, Miles. And we will reconvene at some point in 2025 to not talk about the coming of the Terraphiles. We will talk about something else. We've got a couple of ideas up our sleeves, I think. But thank you very much for taking the time to spend this much time and weather some IT issues along the way.
Always a pleasure. And as a podcaster myself, I know how much of a fucking tedium technical issues can be. But no, always fun to be on the show. Always fun to read the books you fling my way and say read this. Although this one, it did kind of feel a bit at times like being held at gunpoint, but not always.
Yeah.
Okay. I enjoyed the book. Well, okay, no, I appreciated the book. I don't know if I fully enjoyed the book.
Yeah, I think I did enjoy it. I think my final thought on this book is there is a lot of terrific Doctor Who stuff in here, and there's also a terrific farce in here as well, and it's all bound up with a fairly rudimentary and quite rote Moorcock story.
Yeah.
I don't think the combination is entirely successful, but it does have its merits. Yeah.
I think this would be, I don't know, having read the recent Sex and Blake stuff he did with Caribbean Crisis, the prequel to Caribbean Crisis and Caribbean Crisis itself, I feel this definitely would merit more if Michael Moorcock wrote in a straight heroic fantasy pulp vein than trying to tie in a lot of his own cosmology, which I feel is, again, goes back to what I was expecting and anticipating in the first place. And, I enjoyed the book more than I did when I read it in 2010. So, hey, that's a positive. That's like, here is the thing. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't... I can see what it's trying to do, but it never really lands the shot.
Yeah. Well, we'll try and remedy that when we reconvene in 2025 to do Captives of Gore.
No.
Yeah. All right. Not Captives of Gore then. All right. Cool. But cheers, Miles.
Not a problem.
Many thanks to Miles. We've done it, Miles. We've done it. We've looked into the untempered schism and been inspired. And now we can move on to other things like Spearmen of Arn. Maybe. We'll see. So not only thanks to Miles, but thanks as always to our patrons. First, those without tier: Anthony Piconti, Tim Cardos, Dave Dempster, and Sebastian Weetabix. And to our Chaos Engineers, Platin the Grey Fees, Aid Von Stout, Andrew Cicluna, Andrew Spong, Andrew Van Ness, Anthony Porter, Benjamin Fletcher, Ben Hagar, Brandon Mays, Dan Charnley, Dave Griffiths, Dave Voxman, Gabriel Laycock, Harvey Faulkner Aston, Jim Kirkland, Jim Jupp, John W. Lays, Jules Lawrence, Mal Pertwee, Matt Saltz, Michael Hopwood, Nick Hopkinson, Urfa Ziv, Paul McRandall, PJ Cooper, Scott Butler, and Simon Perrins. And of course, thanks to our crafty jugaderos. First up, Adrian Tchaikovsky. More from Adrian soon when we'll talk about his career as an author, his influences, and we'll delve into an as yet unidentified book of his choosing. and Christian Hundal, Graham Holden, Kevin Williams, Liam Turner, Loz, Mark Taylor, Matthew Broom, Murray Palmer, Sean Twist, Toby White, and Taylor Lavery. And a couple of new arrivals on the Donblass. First, Brian Henderson. Brian is Glasgow-based, and you can find his excellent post-orchestral neoclassical 8-bit tinged electronica at sephiros.bandcamp.com. Sephiros spelled S-E-F-I-R-O-S. Sephiros. As ever, I dropped him a line to see what it's about, and he said, "Thanks for checking out the music. Regarding genre fiction, it's mostly horror I read, but I have a vast collection of old sci-fi that I mostly need to get around to. Basically, I used to read Goosebumps, moved on to Stephen King, started buying old pulp horror stuff after Garth Marenghi made aware of it, started collecting books, lots of books. Been listening to the podcast for a couple of years now, so figured I would show you some appreciation. I'm almost 100% positive I found you because of the Rats episode of the podcast." Well, my appreciation to you, Brian, for hopping aboard. That Rats episode remains, when all platforms are taken into account, our most accessed episode. Although I do suspect a lot of the interest is folks looking for an ebook and then tuning out the moment they hear my dulcet tones. We'll also play this episode out with a track from the latest Sephiros album, so stay tuned to the end of the show. Brian's also a writer of pulp horror stories, and you can find him in print in Criminoli Presents Garbology, the Garb-August anthology of awesome trash. And our second new arrival this conjunction is Mark Buckley. And of course, I dropped Mark a line to see where he is in the world, and he said, "Hi, thanks for the welcome. We are in Carmarthenshire, Sir Gar. Moved here just over a year ago from Oxfordshire, still unpacking stuff. My partner is Meriel, Mez, have far too many games and books. Big Doom, Hawkwind, Cthulhu, RPGs, Sandy Peterson, Jerry Anderson fans. I started reading Moorcock in my teens, too long ago. I have my own Derry and Tom's-like story, in that when I was small we lived above Gamage's department store in High Holborn, London, and used to go up onto the roof to sit. My dad was in charge of store security, and it came with a flat above the shop. On Sundays, he would check the alarms, take me with him, and drop me off in the toy department for a couple of hours." Wow. Well, thanks and welcome, Mark and Mez. What a cool story. And yes, our teens do seem unreasonably long ago. Funny you should mention Doom. Phil and I have had the lag of this past couple of weeks, and I spent far too many hours watching YouTube videos about Doom, mostly by Civvy11, whose sense of humour and style vibe with me for some reason. If we covered computer games, we'd definitely have done a few episodes on that series by now, although I'm not sure any of my co-hosts have put the hours into it that I have over the past 30 plus years. And Mark also noted the following that he'd like to see more of on the podcast. More chat with Michael Moorcock, and regarding Hawkwind and Blue Oyster Cult. More RPG discussion. Board games, brackets were big board games fans. Jack Vance, any of his writings. More little known authors, stroke readings. More Phil. And he says, just got to episode 101, so looking forward to 102 plus. Happy belated Christmas and New Year. Well, happy birthday to you and Mez too, and to everyone of course. And on some of these things, I am hoping to reconnect with Mike in the spring, and music is definitely something I want to broach with him. There will no doubt be more RPG episodes coming down the line at some point. We haven't really looked at the Hawkmoon games in any detail. On board games, that's an interesting one, as I'm not a big board gamer myself, but I have been waiting on the new Elric board game that was kickstarted what seems like a gazillion years ago. If that ever turns up, maybe that could be a way in. On Jack Vance, that might be our first request, so I'll definitely bear that in mind, and it might just tie up with something I mentioned only a couple of minutes ago. Spooky. And there will definitely be more obscure or forgotten authors on the slate. And finally, Phil was delighted to be name-checked there, Mark. Despite numerous appearances and glowing feedback regarding her contributions, she still seems to have a bit of imposter syndrome going on. Hopefully, that will suppress it for a while. And eternal thanks to our patron demons, Action Edmonds, Alistair Davison, Andrew Clark, Andy Darby, Derek Clunan, David Lee, Fred Quiche, Gareth Wilson, Glenn Sawyer, Greg Faulkner, Gwen Barlow, Ian Stead, Jenny Stim, Jason Vogel, Joachim Sund, Joe Monty, Johan Hiapa, Jonathan Sharp, Lee Gary, Marius Latauskas, Mark Hebden, Miles Reed-Labato, of course, Neil Burton, Paul Hillary, Randall Gatlin, Steve Round, Tom Murphy, Tony Malazzo, the OG patron Norman Beresford, and last but of course, never least, Robert McMillan. Okay, enough of my blather. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram with the handle @BreakfastRuins. Well, having said that now, on more than 100 occasions, the time has finally come when I need to correct it. Whilst the account is still active on Twitter, I've decided enough is enough over there and will no longer tweet. I've left it there to direct any of the fine folks that we did interact with to other dread portals. Instagram is still up, and I'll carry on there for a while until that place becomes similarly difficult to curate in terms of filtering out the knobheads. But you can find me on Blue Sky, where I'm Stimbot5000. You can email us at breakfastruins@outlook.com. The webpage is breakfastintheruins.com. BITR Breakfast in the Ruins Radio is live on Radio Garden or via the web player at breakfastintheruinsradio.blogspot.com. We have our Patreon page too, and there are a few extra odds and sods on there. But stay tuned for a piece of beautiful electronica, care of Sephiros, in a few moments. The Dead Things We Are Made Of, featuring guest vocals from Catherine Dearborn. And take care, stay safe, until we meet again soon on the Moonbeam Roads.
The